Okay, first looking at this poster, what do you think it's trying to communicate?
Something to do with Britain and war and travel, something or other.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
A lot of patriotism, sort of, with the eagle, the bulldog, and the flag up the top.
Yep, okay.
Recruiting for war.
Yeah. Okay. War poetry is said to be one of some of the most honest pieces of literature. I will attempt to present these poets' perspectives on war through my poster to understand if there's any on it in war. By comparing the war poetry from the First World War of The Soldier by Rupert Brooke, Who's for the Game by Jessie Pope, Perhaps by Vera Brittain, and Untitled by Iris Tree. In the beginning of the war, many of the first wave of war poets had the patriotic mindset and believed that fighting for your country was an honourable action. Both The Soldier by Rupert Brooke and Who's for the Game by Jessie Pope followed the pro-war attitude and attempt to mobilise people into war, something righteous. Pope's intent was influencing men to enlist into the war, focusing on the merits of fighting for one's country, and believed that going to war was a courageous act and staying behind was cowardice. Whereas Brooke focused on promoting the idea that dying for one's country was an honourable sacrifice and that soldiers would receive eternal glory in exchange for their lives. Brooke takes the realistic point in accordance to Jessie Pope's idealistic view of soldiers coming back without any fatalities. With the use of pastoral imagery and first-person point of view, it promotes this highly connected idea of an English heaven, where he believed he and other soldiers would be rewarded with if he died fighting in the war, which is there depicted in my poster using a field, a flower, and a river from the ideal images of nature mentioned in the poem. It exhibits his similarity to Pope's poem through his patriotic stance. The realistic point of view changes to idealistic after the first line entailing his death. Brooke, like many others, felt before being exposed to the violent conditions, euphemised war and dying, and believed his reward would be eternally glorious, as he believed he would have a pulse in the eternal mind, where he believed his reward would be eternally, he would return home to a place with familiar sights and sounds in his afterlife. I placed a clock around the river as it refers to God's mind and exemplifies his belief of an endless life in an English heaven. Brooke imagines himself as a part of nature through imagery, as a pile of dust concealed in the earth, which shows himself at peace with dying as it forms images of a corpse and his relationship to his natural surroundings. Although Brooke may be in a foreign field, it becomes forever England, as his body is mixed with the surroundings when he dies, believing like himself that England will be immortal. Brooke relates to the masses with his patriotic attitude, which is why I placed a British flag on the ground there, similarly to how American astronauts first mapped the moon. I chose to make propaganda posters here to show how Pope attempts to pressurise her audience into going to war. As a jingoistic form of propaganda, poems like Who's for the Game were published in newspapers in 1916 for the same purpose. If you were to mobilise people into war, what language features would you use to create your propaganda posters?
Encouraging ones, like really positive, upbeat ones.
Any other language features?
Like colloquial languages, so you connect to the audience.
Yeah.
I see a rhetorical question might be one of them.
Yeah. Okay, I use rhetorical questions and pronouns from the poem, such as who'll give his country a hand, as it makes the audience question themselves and provides a sense of duty to one's country. And use colours from the British flag here to show the patriotic nature of Britain at that time. These questions catalyse the reader to remove doubt from wanting to enlist war and believe that fighting for one's country is the right thing to do. Employing the light-hearted tone using a simple rhyming scheme, it appeals to a young audience and helps to display her polarisation of the population, as those who join war are courageous and those who do not are cowardly. in a way that a young audience are able to easily understand and adopt her pro-war stance. Utilising colloquial language of lads, just shown there, Pope clearly captures her young audience and by using an extended metaphor for war as a casual and enjoyable game. Here I depict young boys carrying suitcases as the reader is positioned to imagine that war is an exciting and harmless adventure, and the worst outcome would be to come back with a crutch. Purposely not informing her readers of the horrors that they were to face when war began meant that her audience was kept ignorant about what was to come and blindly signed up under her influence. Take a moment to reflect upon whether you would have wanted to go to war if it was portrayed as a fun and exciting adventure.
Might as well.
Both poets use repetition to establish their patriotic mindset towards war. Brooke uses the repetition of the word England to intensify his patriotism, and his paradise and death would be to return home, in the hopes of relating to other people and accept his jingoistic ideals. Whereas Pope used it to guilt her audience to question who would be courageous to join the war. I used an outline of a woman's head and used quotes from the text to form the Union Jack. As both personify England as a woman and in an attempt to motivate people into war. Pope personifies the country because in that time it was a man's duty to protect their woman, and by personifying the country it makes it every man's duty to protect their country. Brooke, however, personifies England as a maternal figure by advancing that England gave birth to him and shaped who he had become as a man, which connects the relationship Brooke has with his much-loved country to the reader's relationship with their mothers. In order to communicate his deep need to selflessly fight and protect England. Both poems display a pro-war attitude, believing that fighting a war is an honourable act and that any that take part in will be presented with glorification. These quintessential patriotic poems expose the naivety of Britain's mindset before understanding the true conditions of war. Vera Brittain and Irish True represent the second wave of war poets sharing an anti-war sentiment, which expose the true horrors of war and therefore take the stance that there is no honour. Brittain's poem, perhaps, is an intimate memorial to her fiancé, Roland Leighton, who was killed in the war in 1915, and depicts the emotional cost on family members, and how it is not honourable to leave those closest to you behind. Irish Tree, however, in her poem Untitled, breaks the mould of women's war poetry and the point of view of staying at home, and blatantly questions if there's any honour in war, by describing the destruction in war, and criticises those at the top of the chain of command. Similar to Rupert Brooke's idealised afterlife, Brittain offers a beautiful landscape in the first 3 lines of each stanza, to develop her background of the poem using pastoral imagery to describe the seasons, golden meadows and white May blossoms of spring, the summer woods and autumn harvest fields, and Christmas representing winter, which shows the passing of the dying year when her fiancé died in 1915 in December. However, Brittain's use of idyllic imagery has a solemn purpose which deviates from Brooke, to show her woman's voice in war poetry of staying at home and how the loss of a loved one can devastate lives and grief. The last line of each stanza reflects upon her fiancé and his death, using the pronoun you, which changes the meaning of a beautiful and joyous setting into a bitterly sad eulogy, to show how his death has broken her heart and nothing will take away from her grief, concluding that the beautiful setting will never be enjoyed again. To show her grief, I have produced an idyllic setting using the meadows and flowers drawn from the poem and made it in black and white to show her anguish, and then placed a woman crying to symbolise the emotional damages of Britain and other women who have lost loved ones during the war. She's crying soldiers' blood, which has forever ruined the beauty of nature in her eyes due to her loss of her fiancé to war, and have covered the woman in overgrown plants and weeds. As that the capitalization of the words you and time have been used in conjunction with the setting to euphemize how time and nature carry on, whilst Britain felt she was living in vain due to her overwhelming grief, and a symbolised widow's weeds, the garments worn in a period of mourning. Irish Tree breaks the mould of women's war poetry, such as Vera Brittain, by exposing the horrors and de-glorifying war. Written in 1917 towards the later stages of war, Tree offers reality by stripping war of any honour, by bringing images of injury and death, flushed with blood, and crippled race, which reveal Jessie Pope's dilated description of war as incredibly misleading. By presenting imagery of a hideous prison gate, it offers a hellish underworld to contrast to Britain's pastoral imagery as a backdrop of war, and shows death to be in abundance, which is why I used dark and hell-like imagery to display the true conditions of war. Thinking of hellish imagery, what might you then think of war in regards to honour?
But I guess it's honestly suddenly a really empty gesture to benefit so few. It's,
It only benefits those in high power who aren't on the ground, really.
In juxtaposition to the diabolical setting, Tree uses classical imagery of battered gods to show her criticism of people in power who are glory but do not enter combat themselves, whilst millions of common foot soldiers gave up their youth and died horrible deaths in an attempt to receive glory, which is why I put images of men trudging through the desolate background. From the impactful imagery, Tree advances the question, why die for honour, as it is an empty state, and utilises the images of the bulldog and the eagle to highlight the greediness of the superstates, America and Britain, to further develop her attack on those who make decisions. Tree also depicts nature of a ravaged nest to emphasise how in gaining power, much destruction must be caused. I used large pictures of the bulldog and the eagle with gold and other valuable objects to show greed, and placed 16 crosses underneath to show how many millions of soldiers died to receive that glory. Take a moment to reflect upon how many 60 million soldiers really is, as it is almost 4 times the population of New Zealand. Both poets capitalise words to communicate their purpose. Britain, to show that there's no honour in leaving your loved ones behind, as not even time can heal a broken heart. And Tree capitalises pride, hate and folly to show how venturing for honour is a foolish goal, as it is a vacuous and unattainable concept, as they will only end up dead, which is depicted on my poster using a soldier reaching out for nothing. Both poets take an anti-war stance, where Tree openly criticises the war, or criticises people in power who lead soldiers to their deaths, whilst Britain indirectly attacks war from depicting the effects on the people soldiers leave behind. By comparing the poetry of The Soldier by Rupert Brooke, Who's for the Game by Jessie Pope, Perhaps by Vera Brittain, and Untitled by Irish Tree, it is resolved that there is no honour in war, as it is an empty endeavour. And poets who glorified going into battle and expressed a pro-war attitude had not yet experienced or understood the great devastation and horror the war caused. War poetry continues to hold great importance because war is still going on today, and people are led to believe that fighting for one's country is an honourable act. However, by examining war poetry, it seeks to educate that war is devoid of any such glorification. Does anyone have any other comments?
I've got some